in walks in this gentleman with two bodyguards. And we didn't know who this guy was. So he just sits there and he says, look, I want to help my people do farming. So who are you? So he was the president of Sulfas, the surrendered Ulfas.
Hi, I'm Surabhi Sapra. Welcome to my podcast, The Migrating Occult. Entrepreneur is a very commonly coined term, but have you heard of naturepreneurs? Well, we have with us today Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, the founder and CEO of Clover Organic, Biometric Eco Solutions and Wellness Foundation, and a naturepreneur. A passionate conservationist with more than 2 decades of experience, supporting more than 50,000 farmers by bringing sustainability across various verticals. Bestowed with many awards from the Government of India for his achievements, Mr. Agarwal is a living encyclopedia of natural farming and vintage rock. He was introduced into the world of beneficial microbes by accident, and while working with them, he realized their awesome potential to create a better world when given the right environment. He started creating ecological and innovative solutions in the field of wastewater treatment, solid waste management, agriculture, aquaculture, and animal husbandry, and thus was born Clover Organic and many other companies. Hello, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Surabhi.
So, how did you get into nature conservation? What were the main drives?
So, reflecting back, I guess, when I was in school, my mother used to be very, very scared about, going into my pocket, the school pockets. Because, normally speaking, there used to be, frogs or scorpions or caterpillars, something.
In your uniform?
Inside, yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
So, I used to look at them, study them. I even dissected some tadpoles to understand how I can harvest the silver from the intestines and things like that. So, I was always attached to...
Wow. A very curious anatomical child.
Yeah. So, that, and then I think my parents used to take us to the mountains a lot, and we used to be in the forest. So, always really developed a sense of appreciation and respect, for nature.
Today, the word organic has become really big, It's not just restricted to farming or eatables, It's kind of expanded to everything. How and where do you think that organics, the concept, was born?
So the concept was born in Germany. Okay. And so let's understand one thing very clearly, that before the World War II, especially, the whole world was organic, more or less, including India. And chemical farming started here probably in the late 1950s, early 60s. Before that, the whole country was organic. And the Allied forces, when they won the war, what happened? That they walked into Berlin and they found large quantities of, poisonous liquids which are there, which Hitler had planned to poison the waterways. And he could never do that. He lost the war before that. And then a large stockade of bombs, which were used, which were going to be used, but again, they could not be used. And bombs, as you know, are made out of potassium nitrate.
Which is harmful for the soil.
Yeah, and which is basically a key ingredient in, the chemical fertilizers. Now, Americans, very good at marketing. So they threw some of that poisonous liquid on plants and found that insects were dying.
Okay.
So they found a usage for that. So that's how the chemical part started. And along with that, they used nitrogen into the soil. They used potassium nitrate. And they found a good growth of plants happening.
Okay.
Now, organic is something which is, to do with nature. So you take the power of nature to assist you in farming. So, like for instance, you look at, for example, the earthworms to turn the soil for you.
Yeah.
You look at birds to do, pest control.
Pollination.
Pollination, etc.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a slow process, but it's a permanent process.
Yeah. What are the general problems that are associated with organic farming? We are not using any pesticides, any chemicals. How do you deal with things like, soil nutrition or pest control or other things?
Organic, unfortunately, become a very abused word. Organic, what it actually means is, so number one, that you cannot use any form of synthetics, any chemicals or pesticide or anything like that. You can't use that, You cannot use any transgenic genetically modified seeds or anything like that.
Basically, anything that has been hampered by human.
Which is against nature.
Which is against nature. Okay.
Yeah. So you cannot use all that.
All right. Okay.
And like, for example, if you look at the poultry or if you look at the cattle, the animals and all that, they need to be free range.
Yeah.
Just roam around, not in cages.
Okay.
Okay. Then you have standards which are there from every country. Like you have the EU standards in the European Union. You have the the USDA standards in the US. You have the NPOP standards in India. Like that, every country has their own organic standards where they have the do's and don'ts in it.
Okay.
Now, apart from that, there's a distinction between organic and traditional. So there are this bit of confusion people have. So the difference is that in organic, there's also something called organic certification.
Okay.
Which a third party does to certify that your farm is organic.
Okay.
And second is the use of modern tech.
Okay.
Okay, you use satellite imagery, you use drones, you use sensors for enhancing your productivity.
So that is not allowed in organic farming?
It's allowed.
Or it is allowed. Okay.
It's allowed. It's allowed. Highly allowed.
All right.
So you are using the technology to enhance your yield, at the same time reducing your cost of cultivation.
All right. So just to clarify, how do you use a satellite or a drone to help you in...
Yeah. So today, satellites, the technology has gone so far that a drone or let's say a satellite can take a picture and tell you what is the deficiency in your soil.
Okay, like that.
Like, the nitrogen, potash or whatever it may be. They can actually tell you that.
All right.
They can also tell you the water resources. Okay. Right. They can tell you if there's any, pest infestation or disease infestation in the crop.
Okay.
So these are modern techs, and then, if mankind has access to it, you should use it.
But still, in spite of all the efforts that are being put in, organic farming has not grown by leaps and bounds in India, in spite of India being the world leader in the agricultural sector.
When we started organics in India, we was, starting a new concept. How do you create an Indian standard? So that time, it was borrowed from the European Union. Okay. Now, when you borrow it, so it's a good starting point, but not an end point.
Exactly.
Why? Because every country has its own culture, own diversity, which needs to be respected. Okay. Like, I'll give you a small example. Like, for example, the shifting agriculture in the Northeast, right? Now, many say this is not organic.
Okay.
But that's been going on for 2,000 years. You can't stop it. And if that can be used as, part of the definition, it will benefit so many people.
Absolutely.
Right? There are many other examples like that. So one was that the stage was set that the way organic is going to get introduced into the country is going to be the way the Europeans or the Americans look at it.
Okay.
Right? So
which may not be suitable for it.
Not be suitable to it. So like, for what is the fallout of that? You have many organizations like Fab India and so many others who are selling rice for 300, 400 rupees a kilo.
Agreed.
Right? And so it's become a kind of a boutique culture.
Yeah.
So organic has been labeled as a food for the rich. People are, not like normal, let's say middle class or lower middle class, don't have access to it.
Yeah.
Right? Because the price is an issue. So much so that even if you try to sell organic at a cheaper price, it's looked down upon. Second, that's the consumer point of view I'm talking about. Now, from the production point of view, there are also a lot of more myths than facts about organic.
Okay.
Like, for instance, if a chemical fertilizer is able to give, let's say, 20%, 25% of nitrogen to the soil, so then compost. Compost is for the soil and not the crop.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
It's a distinction one needs to know about, that you're not adding your compost looking at your standing crop or your flowers or whatever. You're adding it for the health of your soil.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
The focus is on the soil and not the crop in organic.
Okay.
Chemical is the reverse. So now what happens is that if you're saying it at 20-25% nitrogen, so you look for that nitrogen in the compost, which has a natural nitrogen in a non-assimilable form, that it cannot be taken in by the plants immediately, about 1.5 to 2%.
Okay.
Right. So now you want 25% nitrogen. So what are you going to do? Put in some 50 tons of compost
But is that
to reach 25%, right? That's what the conventional thinking is.
Okay, agreed. Okay,
But that's not true.
exactly.
Because you're not adding the nitrogen for the crop, you're adding it for the soil health. For that, 2 to 3 tons is more than sufficient. So that myth is there. Second, okay, I'm growing organic.
Okay.
Where's the market? There is also the myth that, okay, tomorrow if I switch to organic, my yields are going to fall. Of course, they're going to fall.
Okay.
But if you do it gradually, say, reducing your chemical intake by 20-25% every cropping cycle, your yields never fall.
Okay.
Right. I mean, you can't switch to organic overnight, obviously.
Agreed.
Your soil is not there to support that growth. So, one is the myths regarding the production side, and then there's a myths regarding from the consumption side. We need to bridge that gap. And the government right now is doing some wonderful things on the production side. Consumption side, yet a lot of campaigning needs to be done. You know, till that happens.
Big gap. As of
There's a
now,
huge gap. I'll give you a statistic.
as of now,
I'll give you a
it's big
small
gap.
statistic. You know, like the US, will let's say, I know what the population is. I think it's some 10-20% of India's population. Presents a $50 billion organic market.
Okay.
And India with 1.2 billion population presents something like less than $50 million worth of this thing. That's it.
That's it. Which
Yeah,
is
so that's the gap.
because,
That's the gap.
It's a huge gap. Yeah.
Exactly. So that needs to be closed. And I think by looking at talking to doctors, talking to teachers, talking to so many other, communities, organic can make it, mainstream. That's not a problem.
Okay. What is the role of the different government agencies in promoting or rather bridging this gap of organic farming? Like, do you feel the departments, not just agriculture or horticulture, but even agencies like, fisheries, forests, and maybe like animal husbandry, you feel there is a role of all these organizations?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, see, production is, the domain of agriculture, horticulture. Fair enough. But the consumption, it's in the domain of all other departments. Now, here, you're talking about a mindset change. And that can only happen when other departments, take interest in this. For instance, the Department of Education. Today, you talk to a child in Mumbai or let's say Delhi, where does my food come from? And you say from the refrigerator.
Yeah.
It doesn't even know it comes from the farms.
Sure. Yeah.
Then even like tourism, for instance, why can't you have ecotourism in a big way? Where there are foreigners coming and working on organic farms. Why can't Indians come on working on organic farms and understanding more about it? Why can't you teach botany, biology, by taking children to the farms?
Okay, tell us your journey from an entrepreneur to a naturepreneur and the kind of difficulties that you faced or you've overcome.
I was like any other person working in, other domains. Like my father's business was for distribution of Myco and Bosch automobile parts, which I ran for many years. And I sold computers, all that I did. And then my uncle gave me, just called me up saying that he's found, a Japanese company wanting to, have an Indian partner to propagate, microbes.
All right.
To use for farming, etc. And all that. Would I be interested? I said, yeah, why not?
And your childhood memories suddenly came alive.
That and then I was completely bored.
Okay.
I was selling spark plugs and all that rubbish. I just couldn't take it.
All right.
So they had the regional office for Asia in Thailand.
Okay.
So I said, nothing else, go and get a massage done and come back. So anyway, I was there for a couple of weeks. And I fell in love, with the way this technology worked. I saw the results. I saw the application. I spoke to farmers. I lived with farmers. And, the Japanese were absolutely equally passionate about what they were trying to deliver to the world, or they wanted to change the world. I loved the spirit. So just went with that, right? So then I found something that, I could use as a tool to do it. So I found a product. But later on, I also found that just a product is not enough.
Okay.
You got to have solutions, complete end-to-end solutions. Hence, 2008, started Clover as a solution company rather than just a product company.
Okay.
And then we went into, organic farming, end-to-end solutions, right from production, certifications, processing, marketing of the produce, everything.
Okay.
And plus did the same thing for aquaculture, where we are supplying inputs and other things in many states.
Okay.
Wastewater, there are companies like Ion Exchange, Procter & Gamble, and a couple of others who are using our products to,
Okay.
again, all organic certified, to improve their the way they treat their water.
Okay.
So that's how I think the journey basically started.
All right. Interesting. You've been featured in the 2022 issue of the National Agricultural Today magazine for your commendable work with the Northeast states of India. But how has it been? It's not like when you talk about Northeast, it's exciting, but it's also a little scary.
So for many people, Northeast represents, it brings in different images. Just like, for example, for many years, the West thought of India in terms of elephants and snake charmers. Okay. And that's how they're looking at Northeast, that, okay, it's jungly, it's like tribals and, all kinds of nonsense. Yes, Northeast has its set of issues. Some are, most of it are man-made. Okay. I will not go into politics with you. So why?
No, yeah, when we would, yeah.
Okay. But for us, for me personally, it has been an extremely interesting journey. A lot of learning that happened. I mean, I used to go there to teach, but I actually had to come back wiser each time, with each trip, by meeting these humble, yet simple people in Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya. I've been to all the northeastern states. I'm working in almost all of them.
Okay.
There have been a lot of, how should I say, interesting episodes that happened. One day I get a call from the Home Secretary, Assam, that somebody going to meet me. I was sitting in the hotel. And in walks in this gentleman with 2 bodyguards. And we didn't know who this guy was. So he just sits there and he says, look, I want to help my people do farming. So who are you? So he was the president of Sulfas.
Oh.
The surrendered Ulfas.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And some 2,000 of them were surrendered to the government.
Okay.
But after surrendering, they had no income source. So here's what a brilliant idea, that, okay, I would like to, that farmers in Assam are not fully utilizing the land. They take 1 crop or 2 crops. Remaining season, we will take a crop and divide it with a landowner.
Okay.
So that was a very interesting. It almost took off, and for whatever reason, it really didn't, reach a level that we wanted it to. Other day,
how was it feeling in that room? The energies in the room at that time?
Initially it was strange. And this guy was telling us all about his stories. Okay. And what all he did and all that. I can't share that here in public domain. I could understand why it happened and, how it happened, all that, So that's one thing. Then second, episode was, it always comes to my mind, So we were doing, training on organics in one place. And we were teaching them how to do composting and many other things. And we heard gunfire.
Okay.
From a nearby village.
Okay.
So we said, okay, we were very used to gunfires in the Northeast.
Okay.
One old man started crying. So we asked him what happened. So he says, I know why the police is here. They're after my son.
Okay.
Who's turned a terrorist. He did not go.
He's attending your class.
He attended the
and he
whole
knows that the police is there.
Yeah. And the firing stopped after some 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever.
Goodness.
We go to the village, and we see his son, middle of the village, his body lying there, riddled with bullets. And the guy refused to take custody of the body.
Has it ever happened that you've been at a place where there's firing or you're having a class or something and something happens over there?
The firing I've seen is 20 feet away from where I was.
Okay.
Then we were at a place, after coming out, that time I used to smoked a cigarette and came back. And we're sitting in the hotel having lunch at 4 p.m. And 10 minutes from where we were, there were 2 grenade blasts.
Oh.
So, I mean, this was something that happens. Okay. And
How can you be so normal about it? I mean, like, doesn't it scare you? Doesn't it kind of, like...
so, once you go there, the people are so amazing.
Oh, I agree, but you just had a grenade blast off where you were there like 10 minutes ago. It could have been a few minutes here and there. So doesn't it
I could step
doesn't
out
it
of,
bother you?
I could step out of this room and die. Right?
Yeah,
Anything can
I
happen.
agree. Yes,
Okay.
it's true.
So, I mean, we used to go, I'm talking about earlier times. There used to be terrorists roaming around, with their guns and everything, mask on their faces, not troubling anybody, just roaming around. It's part of the culture. You got to understand them. It's not
It was
unsafe.
difficult to take in, but I understand. I understand what you're
It's just
saying.
not unsafe. It's a very, very safe place.
You personally believe that Northeast, or for that matter, all the mountain states, need to become organic. And you've actually gone a step further and commended that all mountains, hills, wetlands, and islands can easily be converted into organic zones and organic hubs because they're the very obstacle to conventional farming in these regions can act as enablers for organics.
Sure.
So can you please elaborate this for our audience?
See, one thing is for sure that all the eco-sensitive zones in every country, not only India, should always be protected.
Agreed.
Okay. Moment you bring in green farming, like conventional farming there, you are poisoning the place. Chemical farming needs water. Chemical farming needs larger tract of lands, right? So now these obstacles for us act like a barrier. So for organic, small is beautiful. You don't have to have large tracts of land, right?
Easier to manage also.
Easier to manage. The farmer can make his own compost very much on the farm and use it. So it becomes very sustainable. Don't have to be dependent on chemical inputs and things like that. Right? Government is doing also a wonderful thing. Like, for example, they are trying to make both sides of the Ganges, right, from Gavmukh till, West Bengal, completely organic.
Okay, and in India, Sikkim has become the world's first fully organic state. Tripura and Uttarakhand are following suit. What exactly does it mean to become a fully organic state? I mean, is it really possible? Like how? What does it mean?
Sikkim, or for that matter, like I said, all the mountain states, now going organic would mean that, like I said, the definition of organic, there need to be, yes, certification needs to be there, no doubt. But along with that, there has to be, like certification is just 2%. 98% is changing the mindset of the farmers on one side, giving them protection because they are the biggest risk takers from converting to, chemical to organic.
Organic, yeah.
Yeah. Along with that, doing a consumer awareness. Another aspect to this is that, for example, Sikkim witnessed it also, that, see, no state can claim that they are producing 100% of whatever the people eat.
Agreed.
There's always export,
yeah,
right?
Agreed.
Now, whatever, and then mountain states, and if you're aware, that 80% of the food comes from the plains. So that
How do you control that to be organic?
Yeah. So you need to also have a kind of a supply chain, organic supply chain, to ensure that only organic is going there. So along with, following the standards of organic farming, you also need to treat your waste scientifically, properly. By waste, I mean the wastewater and also the solid waste.
Solid waste, yeah.
So it's many, how should I say, branches to it. You got to look into those and address them carefully. So it's not easy. But one can do it.
Yeah.
It is doable if you make up your mind that you're going to follow it. Now, small population. There, you can reach out to people. You can actually make a big population is very difficult. So that's why I'm saying that you start with the mountain states and then gradually go to the other areas which are eco-sensitive at least. I'm not saying that India should be organic. Reason why organic failed was that people, the government and other agencies, in their excitement or let's say in the pressure for converting a farmer into an organic farmer, promise all kinds of organic premiums
to
the farmers, which don't exist. I mean, premium today is a function of demand supply. And then also, see, another thing is that technologies are fast coming in, like, got hydroponics, aquaponics, urban farming, all those things are coming in, which is interesting in their own way. So let the whole thing unfold.
Moving a little away from organic farming, what are you more fond of? Food, or cooking?
I'm a foodie, as you can see from the side.
So you are very fond of cooking as much as you are of food. And you're so fond of food that you have a rock band that you call the Chicken Roll.
Yeah, that
Now,
was a,
now I understand. See, okay, you are an encyclopedia of vintage rock, okay? But why would you name your band Chicken Roll?
it was not only about food. We were trying to be naughty there.
Okay.
It was chick, N, and then the roll.
Okay.
Right.
All right. It just came out. So, do you perform for the public, or is it just out of a hobby, or how is it?
It's a hobby. In Calcutta, we used to have a band, and I don't know if you're aware, so we used to call it the Backsides.
Okay.
Okay. And
Very interesting names you have.
yeah, there was a reason for it.
Okay.
So it was a 3-member band, and the singer used to be an Assamese guy. Very good voice, but he used to go out of rhythm while singing.
Okay.
So we had a 4th person sitting behind him who was tapping his backside to keep the rhythm. So that's why the name came.
All right.
That's how it
interesting.
happened.
Okay.
And then we had a band when I came to Dehradun. It was called the Time Machine. Lasted for 2.5, 3 years, whatever it was, with college graduates. And then they all went their separate ways, so it kind of dissolved. And now the Chicken Rolls happened.
Okay.
I'm very, very fond of vintage rock. Why? Because
You also have this group called the Doon Rocks, where you do a lot of documentaries on artists and their lives and everything.
Yeah. For me, every band, every song has a story behind it.
Okay.
As bloody interesting, and the lyrics, my God. I mean, you hear the lyrics, I grew up with them and they gave me a sense of power. So I was, if people used to come to my home, I couldn't help myself but share those stories. And then I think a couple of friends said, listen, you're sharing it, why don't you share it more publicly?
Yeah.
So that's how Doon Rocks was born. Objective being, obviously, one, entertainment, and second being education.
Yeah, agree. It's a great effort, and I hope you keep it up.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Then I've taken to aero modeling.
Wow.
So I've got, we made a fleet of 3 aeroplanes so far. So most of it are small gliders. Right. Then we are now working on graduating to bigger models, bigger planes. And now recently I bought a kit which is a 7-footer.
Wow. Okay.
So 7 feet wingspan.
All right.
And probably I get arrested while flying it. I don't know. The playing of rock, the aero modeling, the gardening, So it's a sense of meditation for me. So it's great fun.
You recently also launched your new venture, the Wellnest.
Yeah.
Can you please elaborate about the Wellnest?
Yeah. So Wellnest are 2 things. Wellnest is a food brand that we are trying to come up with.
Okay.
Now, we are working with about 85 farmer producing companies so we have created them across 5 states, comprising of some 55, 60,000 farmers. So like Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, then you got Uttar Pradesh, and then you got Uttarakhand. So right now 5, maybe a couple of more states are going to be added soon. So for us, one umbrella brand, Wellness, that any of the FPC can use and to promote themselves. So more people use it, the more famous it gets. And to promote it more, what we've done is also create these wellness events.
All right.
Which we are doing in Dehradun. And we want to take it to other parts of the country. We are looking at 3 categories of vendors who join us.
Okay.
So one are people who are selling organic food. Second is organic products.
All right.
With, like made with nature.
Okay.
So it could be, for example, hand-painted fabric or natural fabric or cotton, organic cotton. He's making cutlery out of pine needles.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. So conserving all that.
Okay.
So to promote them, give them a kind of a platform to sell. And third leg of wellness is experiential learning.
Okay.
So like you can come there and you can learn pottery. Okay. There's Waste Warriors who I was associated with, still I'm associated with them. They come and tell you how to treat your garbage.
Okay.
We want to be different. We want to be more in the health and wellness space.
Yeah. Would you like to share your future plans with our audience? Anything that is cooking, brewing?
The plans are to take this Wellness. I've created a Section 8 company. It's like an NGO, Wellness Foundation. So I want to use that to, carry out trainings on sustainable farming or training of trainers. That's one thing I want to do. Second is that I want to get into innovation and create these innovative products.
Okay.
Again, organic. It could be in the domain of agriculture, aqua, and wastewater.
Okay.
So that I want to just have lots of ideas. So I want to do that. Third is that, a lot of these pharma producing companies, there are some very good companies out there who are making some very good products, but do not have the financial means or, let's say, the managerial way of selling them. So carrying out gap funding, not directly, okay, but there are a lot of companies giving CSR funding. So if we can do a due diligence and give that ranking to these companies, then they can directly invest into it.
Okay.
So it'll be a win-win situation for both. That's
yeah. Absolutely.
And last is I'm invited many times by state governments and foreign companies as well, to help them make organic pathways.
Okay.
Like, for example, the other day, Chief Minister Mizoram requested if I could help in terms of, convert Mizoram into an organic state.
Okay.
Right. So now that becomes interesting.
Yeah.
There is a German bank wanting to invest into Meghalaya and with 25,000 farmers.
Okay.
How to do that? So Deloitte and other people we were talking to.
So basically, you're like the bridge between the two. There are finances, there are companies, there is help. It needs to reach the right place and the right people.
Yeah. Basically as a consultant,
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been like a really enlightening and educative session. And I hope that the viewers have so much to learn and so much to be inspired from. So here is a picture that I've clicked instantly.
God.